What is going on, everybody? The NFL Scouting Combine is officially behind us, which means it is time for a brand new mock draft. Really excited for this one. We get to react to what we saw at the Combine. Definitely some big risers, some high-flying 40s, some of them expected, some of them not. So some fun players to talk about today. Also reacting to some of the information we're hearing. I got to go out to Indianapolis myself, but just the ever-circulating news cycle coming out of the Combine every year of which direction some teams may or may not be going, which players they may or may not like. Always good to get some of that info. And then just myself getting further along in the scouting process, have a lot more opinions on these players, who I think should be going higher, who I think should be going lower. So definitely a big mock draft here today. Very excited. In terms of what I would do versus is this a what do you think happens mock draft, I do like to keep things relatively realistic, even if I'm doing a what I would do mock draft. So there are some picks at the top of the draft, most notably with someone like Shedeur Sanders, for example, that is going to be more of a what I think happens pick. There's a couple prospects as well that I don't necessarily buy the hype, but do think they're going to go early, so I wanted to try to find the best fit for some of those guys I might be a little bit lower on. But let's go ahead and get started. Another great thing about this newest mock draft is I've got my graphics ready to go. We are in full production mode now with the mock drafts. No more screen grab on the PFF mock draft simulator. But let's get started with the Tennessee Titans with the number one pick. There have been so many fascinating conversations about this number one pick this year. And frankly, in terms of predicting what the Titans do, I don't have a strong grasp on this. I think there's three routes they could go. They could stick and pick the quarterback. They could stick and pick someone like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter if they just want to get who, in their opinion, is the best player in the draft. Great, they need superstar talent. Or do they talk about trading down and entertain what kind of offers might be there? I do think there is a very realistic situation that what I'm about to do for the Titans here does happen in real life, but this is what I would do if I were the Titans here, and that is trade down with the New York Giants just down to the number 3 spot, especially with all of the reports that Cleveland very likely is going to be going quarterback one way or another. That means you really get your pick of the litter of the best non-quarterback in this draft. But even if they do take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, you can go the other route. And I think, as we'll talk about at number 3, either of those guys are excellent fits for the Titans. Yes, you need a quarterback. Yes, Cam Ward, I think, is worthy of going number 1. I think if you stack him up compared to all of the 101 QB picks over the last 10 years or so, he's further down the list. I think if you're Tennessee, you make this trade, you hold out to make sure you get the Giants' first-round pick next year because you know they are desperate, and they're afraid that you're going to stick and pick a quarterback. Cleveland's going to take a quarterback, and they're going to be stuck twirling their fingers. So you can really hold them ransom. They are in a much more desperate situation than Tennessee is to get that quarterback now and get things going. I think for Tennessee, you can really start to build up this roster. I think it's fair to ask if you have the offensive infrastructure, from offensive line to playmakers to, frankly, just identity as an offense, to put a quarterback into that situation where they're actually going to come in and have success. I think for Tennessee, it's much more rational to say, hey, let's build up the rest of the team a little bit, and then hopefully next year, between our pick and the Giants' pick, we're in a good position in what theoretically should be a better quarterback class, just from, a 5,000 miles away perspective. You can maybe get an Arch Manning if he declares, or Drew Aller, or maybe other guys start to break through like Cam Ward did this season as well. So I do like the trade down option for Tennessee. That's what we're going to do here. And then for the Giants, obviously very straightforward. You go get Cam Ward. I think he's a great fit with Brian Daboll. Like I said, not the perfect quarterback to take with the 101 pick, but I do believe in Cam Ward. Excellent playmaking ability. Love his year-to-year development. And an underrated processor of defense as well. I think he does throw with anticipation really, really well. So Cam Ward, number 1 to the New York Giants for this year's first and next year's first. At number 2 here, the Cleveland Browns. This is what I was talking about. I really do believe the reports that Cleveland is going to take a quarterback no matter what. I have no reason to believe that this organization This ownership is in a position to really act logically about this pick. Shedeur Sanders, all the rave. It's reported the Giants are comfortable taking him at 3 and all this stuff. I think that leaps into the ownership from the Cleveland Browns perspective, and they say, great, we should be comfortable taking him number 2. Unfortunately, it's just not a good spot for Cleveland with their ownership. Obviously, this is the same team that forced the trade for Deshaun Watson, whether Stefanski and company wanted to do that or not. This obviously is not the pick I would make. I think Shedeur Sanders is closer to being worth the 32nd pick in the draft than the second pick in the draft. I just don't see the upside. I don't love putting him in here when this offensive line is such a mess. Cleveland is just a mess. But this is going to be one of those picks that I really do think this is, at this point in time, based on the information from Adam Schefter and some of the beat writers, this is, I think, what Cleveland is going to do, and I wanted to include that in my mock draft here today. Now, the other thing I wanted to include in this mock draft is a Myles Garrett trade. I do think it happens. I think Cleveland actually, it kind of makes sense for them. They probably won't be winning in this window of Myles Garrett's prime. You can absolutely get the peak of value that you would be able to get for a Myles Garrett trade, multiple first-round picks, I think, and some from certain teams. And I don't think Myles Garrett's changed his mind about coming back here. So I am going to include a trade here. I'm just going to talk about that right now. It's going to be, in this situation, the Detroit Lions taking that 28th pick, sending it to Cleveland, their first-round pick next year, and then it's going to be 2 third-round picks on top of that, and a reason Cleveland can justify that a little bit, Detroit can justify that a little bit more, is those were compensatory picks that they got for the minority hire of Aaron Glenn with the New York Jets. So for Detroit, I think it's easy to justify, hey, we got a pair of third-round picks for doing something we would have done anyway. We can take advantage of that, get that extra value on top of it. At pick 28, they were probably going to take an edge rusher anyway. It's really just saying we're going to spend that first-round pick next year that we expect to be very low in the draft again to pair Myles Garrett with Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's very easy to explain from Detroit's side of things. And then for Cleveland, I think that's a pretty good haul, all things considered. But let's go to the Titans at number 3. And this is where you can kind of debate between Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, the two best, Ashton Jinty's in this conversation too, but, running back positional value and all that stuff. So really the two most impactful non-quarterbacks in this draft, most likely, will be Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And for Tennessee, this is why the trade down makes extra sense. You can really flip a coin and be happy with either. I think Abdul Carter is phenomenal. He is really one of the best edge rush prospects I've watched. He's up there with guys like Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa. So that's an easy sell when that edge group is such a tragedy in Tennessee right now. They're trying to shop Harold Landry. I don't know who wants Harold Landry right now. He's most likely going to get cut. And then, man, I really would like Travis Hunter on this team, too, with the way he could help the offense and a cornerback room that could use another body, too. But I am going to go with Abdul Carter. I just think getting that potential, Micah Parsons, it's a lazy comp, but it's the right comp in terms of their career trajectory, the way they win, the way they move, coming out of Penn State, the former linebackers moving to the edge, wearing number 11. It's really wild how accurate that comp works. But I love this for Tennessee, and then hopefully build things up and go for a quarterback next year. All right, at number 4, the New England Patriots. Easy pick here. We are going Travis Hunter. I do want to talk about, though, just how incredible of a fit this would be for the Patriots. The last team, by the way, to take a cornerback and see what he can do on offense with someone that's hopefully going to be starting next to Travis Hunter here in Marcus Jones. This couldn't be a better fit for Travis Hunter on the defensive side of things. You have a legitimate all-pro caliber lockdown corner in Christian Gonzalez. And then you have a guy in the slot that hopefully can stay healthy in Marcus Jones. Travis Hunter can be that ball hawk on the outside, something like a Trayvon Diggs, that ideal number 2 corner that's targets are going to get funneled his way because of how good the coverage is from the other guys. And then you see those ball skills that are just truly generational, obviously, because he's a great wide receiver as well. You could be talking about like an annual 7-8 pick player in that situation with Travis Hunter. And then offensively as well, they desperately need wide receiver help. You're talking about the same organization that has shown the, foresight and willingness to take a corner and use him at wide receiver. Travis Hunter's been very open. I want to play both ways. They're going to have to be smart about it. I don't think he can come out and play 130 snaps every week in a 18-week season. But you get a little bit more juice as a run-after-catch guy, somebody can design targets for, and then bring him in on third downs. Just simplify the route tree, go balls, comebackers, dig routes, what he did at Colorado so well. And even if, you're talking about, we're still going to want like a real number one or a 1B guy that's a little bit more of a complete route runner, and maybe Travis Hunter turns into that, but that's still incredibly valuable with his ball skills and instincts after the catch. So I did want to just rave about for New England. This really is just the perfect fit. All right, at number 5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I battled with this one because I think you could consider a Mason Graham to really beef up that defensive line. Try to develop double Masons on the inside with Mason Smith, their second-round pick last year that showed some flashes at the end of the year with those two edge guys on the outside and just have this awesome defensive line. I do want to say it's a great option for the Jags. It's actually not the option I'm going to go with here, though. It's going to be Ted McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. There's a lot of mixed conversations about McMillan, but the more I thought about this, the more it became a no-brainer for me. You bring in Liam Cohen, you get Trevor Lawrence, hopefully back healthy next year, and you give him Ted McMillan and say, we're going to hit the ground running. We are throwing lighter fluid on this thing to shut everybody up about how bad Trevor Lawrence is. Schematically speaking, I think Ted McMillan has drawn a lot of Mike Evans comparisons. I think he's the perfect blend of Mike Evans and Drake London. I think he can actually do more than Mike Evans can, but he certainly can do the Mike Evans stuff in Liam Cohen's playbook coming over from Tampa Bay. I think Brian Thomas Jr. likewise can do a lot of the stuff they did with Chris Godwin and McMillan, the rookie, with those quick in-breakers, the tunnel screens, getting the ball in his hands, the electric after-the-catch stuff. I think schematically speaking, it's going to make things not just easier on Trevor Lawrence to have these great wide receivers, but on Liam Cohen to have those defined roles filled with superstar players. And if you're worried about Ted McMillan's long speed, if you think he's got to be more of an intermediate and short game threat, what better wide receiver to pair him with than Brian Thomas Jr., who is an amazing vertical threat? That combination of those two guys and whatever you want to work in the slot with Evan Ingram and Parker Washington, that is, talk about complementary skill sets and a premium wide receiver duo for a decade. It's dangerous to talk about that kind of conversation, but it just really makes sense for me for Tet at number 5 for the Jags. Then the Raiders at number 6. I'm going to go with Ashton Ginty. I am. Again, not going to argue if you want to build up the defensive line with someone like Mason Graham or one of these edge rushers if you really like them. But for me, this is the best player available, which is exactly what they did last year when they took Brock Bowers at a position that's supposed to be less valuable. That worked out pretty damn well for them. But I think you talk about hiring Pete Carroll, coming in to try to establish an identity for the type of football Pete Carroll wants to play. This is the exact pick that's going to do that. I think the Raiders have an underrated offensive line. Colton Miller at left tackle, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who they drafted last year. You got Parham. You got the breakout of Jordan Meredith. DJ Glaze showed some flashes. We'll see about right tackle there. But I think they have an underrated offensive line. You come in, you could hopefully, you get Michael Mayer healthy this year, go 12 personnel with Bowers and Mayer, and then, of course, Ashton Ginty coming in. Any quarterback could run that offense, right? You're just running the ball and, getting the ball into some playmakers in the quick passing game to create after the catch. It's really a logical offense for this team to build. Not to mention, you keep Ginty in the Mountain West. If there's any part of the Raiders that says we're trying to continue to build this fan base as the Las Vegas Raiders, you might be able to convert some Boise State fans up the road there, bringing in Ashton Ginty. Just a little plus on top. That's not why we make the pick, but it's just a nice little cherry on top. So I do like Ginty at 6 to the Raiders. I think this is his ceiling. And his floor is probably about 6 picks later to the Dallas Cowboys. A player this special just doesn't sit around in the draft that long. We've seen that with guys like Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson also went inside the top 10 of their respective drafts. Then the Jets at number 7. This is where Mason Graham is going to go. It's such a common pick for the Jets if he's there. Love it, putting him there next to Quinnen Williams. Look, obviously the focus was on Rodgers and the offense being disappointing. I think you can make a bigger case the defense was realistically an even bigger disappointment for the Jets, how bad their run defense was, and frankly, how bad Quinnen Williams was last year relative to expectations. Coming off a Defensive Player of the Year like candidate type of season, nowhere near that last year. You take a little bit of pressure off of Quinnen Williams by putting Mason Graham next to him. You automatically kickstart your run defense. You get a tough dude for Aaron Glenn to help build that culture. And then, you get Jermaine Johnson back healthy. You got Will McDonald, who was awesome last year. All of a sudden, that defensive line can really come together. So it's a very easy pick for the Jets at number 7. Then at number 8 with the Carolina Panthers, I really battled with what to do for the Panthers here. Even sent out a tweet about what would draft Twitter do in this exact situation. That tweet was stemming from this mock draft. And that's not because I'm unfamiliar with the Panthers or anything like that. I consider myself a closet Panthers fan after living in Charlotte last season. Probably went to more Panthers games than most people in Charlotte last year. So really wanted to make the right pick for the Panthers here. I think the right thing for the Panthers to do in this situation with how the board has fallen to me, Mason Graham is the last kind of debatable like blue chip prospect in this draft. Once he's gone, it becomes a little bit less clear which direction to go here. I think a trade down would be amazing, but I went down the whole list all the way down to like Denver at 20, and I was just like, I don't think any trade up situation truly makes sense. The one team I thought about was Atlanta at 15, coming up for an edge rusher, but they don't have their own third-round pick. So if they would have, coming up from 15, they would have had to give their second-round pick this year for me to want to do that trade as the Panthers. And then Atlanta, it's like, you're only getting one player for a defense that needs every position. Like, that didn't really make sense. I do think Indy potentially coming up for, like, Tyler Warren, but do you trade up to 8 for a tight end if you're Indianapolis? I don't know. Giving up again, probably a second-round pick there. So I couldn't find a dance partner, but I hear you, Panthers fans. Trade down would be ideal in this situation. Then I thought about, all right, we need edge. I think James Pierce Jr. would be my edge of choice. Mike Green, with his history of sexual assault accusations, too risky for me if I'm Carolina with the 8th pick, a pick that this team has to get a player from. I would just be a little nervous about that. And then kind of likewise with James Pierce Jr., man, there's a lot of reports about maturity issues with him. If that stems back to his high school, where actually that was one of the big reports, was a high school classmate of his came out and was like, yeah, this dude kind of sucks. I actually think it's counterintuitive. I don't want to bring him back to his hometown where there might be some tempting existing pulls to negative influences. I don't want to speculate too much there, but I just didn't love that. Another edge option would be Shamar Stewart. I'm definitely not high enough on Shamar Stewart as a top 8 draft pick. I also don't think he's a great fit for Ejiro Evero, who does like a little bit more athleticism to drop guys into coverage, kind of that 3-4 background from his edge guys. So I just didn't see the fit with Shamar Stewart. I ended up shying away from the edge group. Will Johnson is still there. He's been falling on people's boards. Could go Will Johnson, certainly, but for me, I'm either addressing that defensive line. I'm a big trenches guy. You already have J.C. Horn. I think you can find complementary secondary players in free agency and in the draft. If I'm not going defensive line, I am thinking about that wide receiver group. They have options, but they don't have a number 1 for Bryce Young. I think I've talked through this whole thing. What I'm leading up to is I'm going to stick with the Luther Burden pick to the Carolina Panthers, and I debated between him and the upside of a Matthew Golden. I really did, but I'm going to come back to Luther Burden, who quietly had a very good combine. He weighed in over 200 pounds and ran a 4.41. That's an excellent showing for Luther Burden. Based on the tape, I was curious if he was going to come in over 200 pounds, closer to where like a DJ Moore was, which was my pro comp on him, and he did, and he still ran really well. You can go watch my wide receiver video. I'm a big fan of Luther Burden. I think he's getting way too much criticism. I'll end this again by saying I would prefer to trade down, get down to 14 or 15, and hope you can either get Burden or Matthew Golden there in the middle and collect some more picks, because this team really does need a lot of help. But again, that option wasn't there, so we had to try and find the best pick for this team, for this organization. I'm going Luther Burden at number 8. But then for New Orleans at number 9, we debated him at number 8. We're going to take him at number 9, just a little bit further away from that Charlotte environment. James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee for the Saints. This team has got to stop missing on edge rushers, from Isaiah Foskey to Peyton Turner. I think Marcus Davenport, for what they paid for him, was a miss. I mean, James Pierce Jr. on the field is a beast, dude. I was really impressed. Got through his film yesterday. Excited to talk about him in my top 10 edge rushers video, which should be coming out in the next 14 days or so. We've got studs and duds. We've got a live free agent live stream, so we'll see when that video ultimately drops. But really a clean profile as a football player. He's insanely explosive, the speed, the first step. He's listed at 245 pounds, but I think he plays a lot stronger than that. He's got really strong arms. I thought he was just going to be a speed rusher based on kind of what I had heard and his listed size. I was impressed by not just his ability to convert speed to power when he comes in as a wide 9 and generate some of that momentum. I think just the way he could, use his swipes and land his hands inside and push guys aside. He has legitimately strong arms in there, which alludes to me thinking he can develop more of a run defense profile. I don't think you're going to get that right away. But if nothing else, the Saints don't necessarily need run defending edge guys right now. They have some of those dudes. They need guys that can come in and end drives on third down. And James Pierce, between his bull rush, his ability to turn the corner, and some of the inside counters he has as well, he's not going to break out this crazy bag of tricks, but he understands he has the key tools that you need to win in the most basic ways. And if you can do it to all three shoulders, that's going to play in the league. Now, you've got some of those concerns about maturity. Hopefully as he gets older and becomes a professional, maybe this is a situation where you do actually want Cam Jordan back in the building. He hasn't announced his retirement yet. He would be a great mentor for someone like James Pierce just as a professional. So there is some risk attached to some of these reports, but the football player I think is well worth the number 9 pick for the Saints. But then at number 10 for the Chicago Bears, we're going to have someone that I think was a big riser from Combine Week. The first offensive lineman off the board here, it's going to be Armin Membu out of Missouri. Now, you might hear that name at 10 and say, whoa, that's a little early. I think it's going to become much more common for him to be going in this range, and much more common for him to be the first offensive lineman off the board, especially when you kind of have to contextualize like different teams' fits and what they're specifically looking for. Are you a wide zone team looking for an athlete, or more of an inside run team looking for some beef? Are you a team that needs some guard tackle flexibility because you don't know exactly how things are going to play out? Or do you just need that set-in-stone franchise left tackle? There's a lot of different tastes. For the Chicago Bears, Armand Membo is going to be their taste. It's going to be Ben Johnson's taste. He's 6'4", 332 pounds. Had a great combine week. Comes in with 33.5-inch arms. Runs a 4.91 40-yard dash, 34-inch vertical jump, 31 bench press reps. Just a hell of a week for Membu. And for the Bears, not only do you get the mentality that Ben Johnson's going to want, he's going to want to establish the run game in a much more consistent degree for his offense, for Caleb Williams. Membu can do that, absolutely. But he can also do that as a guard for now. They have questions about Braxton Jones at left tackle on if he's a franchise player at left tackle. But he's certainly good enough for now. They need immediate help at guard. Membu can start there, and I think he could be an all-pro caliber guard. I think he can be a great tackle, too. I think this is really the flexible piece with a ton of upside and the mentality that they need. So Membu is coming off the board at 10 for Chicago. And frankly, with the Niners up at pick 11, you could honestly just flip this pick and my pick for the Niners here, Shamar Stewart. So I'm going to be honest, I can't quite get there with the hype on Shamar Stewart. He's obviously a great athlete. He has the best bull rush in this class, no doubt. He's got a great first step. He's got the bull rush down. He can land his hands inside and generate a ton of power. But that was also at 290 pounds. So there's a question about, without the extra 30 pounds behind him, are you going to get that same impact, that same pushback? Probably not, frankly. So then you're like, okay, that's great. You're dropping weight. You tested super well. You're maybe a little more agile than you think. But the only thing you did well was bull rush. So where's the other stuff coming in? Are you able to learn that pass rushing tool belt? I'm much lower on Shamar Stewart. I think if this was all up to me, late first round, early second round, that's where I'm taking Shamar Stewart. The thing is, he's going to go. The league is obsessed with him. He's got this massive hype train. This is essentially Trayvon Walker all over again in a better draft class. So I wanted to implement him somewhere. I do definitely think going back to Chicago at pick 10 for a second, Dennis Allen's going to really like the size profile. He's going to fit that system. You got basically two Montez Sweats theoretically on both sides of that D-line. So it would make sense for Chicago at 10. I did want to drop that. But I just, because I wanted to force him in earlier in this mock draft, then I'm comfortable. I wanted to find the perfect fit. And I do think his skill set in San Francisco would play really, really well. A team that desperately needs some help on the defensive line other than Nick Bosa. They've lost everybody, dude. You think back 3 years ago, this team had fear factor. They don't anymore. Nick Bosa's great, but Buckner's gone. Armstead's gone. They're going to cut Javon Hargrave. They've lost that opposite edge player in Samson Ebukam, who was really good. I haven't gotten that same impact from Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos. With Robert Saleh coming back to San Francisco, this team is going to want to run a lot of stunts and games, and Shamar Stewart's going to be a valuable asset for that. Assuming some of that power is still there after dropping 30 pounds, I think it will be. You're at least going to be able to compress the pocket and allow for loopers and twists to operate. And that's a starting point. Then you pair him with Nick Bosa as a great mentor that can really help him develop more of a pass rushing skill set than he showed in college. And you can hopefully get some of that development and these rare traits that Shamar Stewart does have to come through. So again, I wanted to find a reasonable fit where I could see it working out for Shamar Stewart. But this is still higher than I'd be comfortable with them. Let's go to Dallas at pick number 12. They're going to take Will Campbell and play him at guard for now. I am starting to think Will Campbell with really narrow shoulders, shorter arm length, and just I think he's just going to be a higher upside player at guard. Again, not that you can't take him and try him at tackle. I'm fully game with that, but for Dallas, they really need help on the interior of the offensive line with Zach Martin retiring. I think Campbell can really help them run the ball better, which I know is going to be a focus for them with Schottenheimer coming in. And then if in time you don't get the development you want to see from Tyler Guyton in year 2 at left tackle or at right tackle, eventually you might decide you want to move on from Terrence Steele, who's just not a good pass protector. I don't think it's crazy for Will Campbell, who's got really good technique to kick back outside. But we're going to stop this sort of slide on Will Campbell. But at this point, teams value traits and tackles over guards, certainly. I think Armand Membo is potentially going to climb over a Will Campbell. But it's close, obviously, 10 and 12. All right, at pick 13, we're going to have another trade here. Needs are starting to stack up for Miami, and their biggest need of all is going to be offensive line. And with a couple of those top guys coming off the board here, I'm picking up the phone. I'm cool with moving down 5, 6, 7 spots in this situation. Still feel pretty good about getting a damn good player at 20. And the team coming up is going to be the Denver Broncos, coming up for Tyler Warren. Sorry, Colts fans, you got jumped. If you don't want to get jumped in the draft, get rid of Chris Ballard as your GM. I think he would be sitting put waiting for Tyler Warren without that with that lack of aggressiveness that he's built from But Sean Payton running his team certainly doesn't lack aggressiveness. We know that from his time in New Orleans. Felt like they traded up for their guy every single year. And if Tyler Warren's still there with the 13th pick and they know he's going to go at 14, they're going to pull the trigger on this. And it's going to cost them 50 spots from their second-round pick. They're going to give Miami their second-round pick, the 51st pick. They're also going to throw in a future fourth as well to sweeten the pot. And Miami's going to kick back the 98th pick, that compensatory third-round pick that they got for Christian Wilkins. But Denver's offense needs some juice, man. And Tyler Warren inside Sean Payton's offense, I think, would be the number one target. Cortland Sutton's a good player, but I think Tyler Warren would get fed here. The run after catch ability, how he's going to be able to help the run game too, as a big-bodied blocker out of the Big Ten. I think there's room to grow there, but certainly not going to worry about it. I think they're going to be able to work well with Tyler Wharton on that, and just be a red zone presence and an emergency option for Bo Nix. I just love every aspect of how Tyler Warren fits in with this Broncos offense. But then at number 14 for the Indianapolis Colts, this is where I'm going to have Will Johnson come off the board. I don't think it's crazy that Will Johnson falls into the teens with the injury questions. There's been some raising questions about just how fast he is. He played injured last year, but the tape was just very middling. So it's just tough. It's a good draft class, and wouldn't be surprised if he falls outside of the top 10. But I don't think the fall is going to go too much further here. The Colts have, under Gus Bradley, really not prioritized getting that high-end corner. They've more spent mid-round picks on corners. I do think that has a good chance of changing under the new regime. Lou Anarumo coming in as defensive coordinator has always placed a premium on cornerback. So I do think we could see some mentality shift there. And Will Johnson's just at this point the best player on the board. Does fill a need. They got some contributions from guys like Womack and Jalen Jones. I like those guys, but you just get a better, more fluid player in Will Johnson and let those other two guys compete. It never hurts to have some depth at corner. So think that all tracks. And Kenny Moore's not getting any younger either. So pretty simple pick for the Colts. It sucks that Tyler Warren, they jumped you. You missed out on completing the puzzle for your entire offense there, but it's a deep tight end class. Maybe you can look that way in the second day of the draft. Then at number 15 for Atlanta, this is the team that I think is desperate enough to roll the dice on Mike Green. I don't think people realize quite yet kind of what his history is. Phenomenal player, by the way. I just sat down and watched some film with you guys on Patreon. If you want to get access to my exclusive content over there on Patreon, access to my full player rankings and write-ups and all that stuff, and support my channel, you can head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. But back to Mike Green, he came into college at Virginia with a no-nonsense clause because of a sexual assault accusation coming out of high school. And then another situation popped up, presumably with another girl, and they kicked him out of school. He had to sit out a year. He ends up having to transfer down to Marshall, and you're just hoping that he has grown his character. It's a sensitive subject, obviously, but it's just the reality of the situation. Teams are going to have to do their due diligence. Nothing has seemingly popped up in the last 2 years at Marshall. You're just going to have to hope that, you hope whatever the accusations are weren't true, but B, if they were, that he's not going to repeat that stuff. We see what has happened with Deshaun Watson and Justin Tucker and so many other situations. It's a real thing in the NFL. So there's going to be some of that risk with him. But the player is probably edge number 2, frankly, even ahead of James Pierce. He's a really special player, and Atlanta needs to roll the dice. They have talk about their interdivision Saints whiffing on defensive line picks. Feels like death taxes and the Falcons being unable to find defensive line help for as long as I've been an NFL fan, frankly. So the talent is undeniable with Mike Green. The need is undeniable for the Falcons. We're going to roll the dice there at 15 for Atlanta. And then Arizona up at pick 16. We're going to have another offensive lineman coming off the board, Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Really just a solid player, great play strength, excellent hand usage, excellent production at Texas in terms of pressure is allowed and all of it. So pretty easy pick, man. I would put him at right tackle right away. And you're hopefully rolling forward with Paris Johnson, Kelvin Banks. You got a little bit of extra O-line wiggle room there. Maybe you could start him at guard or kick someone like Jonah Williams inside maybe. You got some flexibility. Jonah Williams is an option at right tackle, but he's always hurt and not that great of an option when he's there. So it's not like the most urgent pressing need, but you're talking about building for long-term success in Arizona. That offensive line was really a problem. Even though I like their offensive line coach that went to Dallas, they just need talent in that room. Kelvin Banks is going to bring that to the table. And I do just want to note on the Cardinals, some Cardinals fans will say you got to go D-line. I get it. I think they can go D-line. But looking back on it, they do have a lot of help on the way. BJ Ojulari missed the whole season. A lost season for the first-round pick, Darius Robinson, last year. Both of their interior D-line signings barely played last year. Baron Browning, I think, finally showed some flashes late. We'll see if they're able to get him back. They traded for him. I do think there is some help on the way for that defensive line. You could draft there, but there's a reason I'm a little more comfortable staying away from that and going O-line for them. But Cincinnati Bengals at pick 17. This is going to be one of the most common mock draft picks, certainly outside of the top 10 in your mock drafts, because it just lines up so well. And that's Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, the interior defensive lineman. They've already decided they're going to cut Sheldon Rankins, which was a no-brainer. That signing was a colossal failure. They clearly need that piece on that defense, that guy that can play 3-tech, that can penetrate, that can rush the passer. Walter Nolan is a really nice player, man. He's got great pad level. He's got a variety of rush moves. He's got some power. I think he can give you exactly what they wanted in Sheldon Rankins. That D-line was really bad outside of Trey Hendrickson. It's very clear to me that's what they're going to focus on here. And if he's there at 17, I don't think there's any hesitation at all that this is their guy. Then at 18 for Seattle, this is a true what I would do mock draft, and it's one of those deals where I'm just going to keep doing this until I hopefully speak it into existence for you Seahawks fans. I'm going interior offensive line. I'm not trading down and messing around with teams like Miami and the Chargers and Green Bay who could potentially take interior O-line. I'm not messing around and risking, him going. Even Tampa Bay could use an upgrade from Ben Bredesen. So it's like, I'm taking Gray Zabel here. I think he can play center for you, which they need. He can play guard for you. I understand that John Schneider has something against interior offensive linemen. It's time for my guy, John Schneider, who I like other than that, to wake up, man. The league is valuing this position. They're drafting them early, oftentimes right next to these tackles inside the top 10, and they're paying them just as much as tackles, slightly less, but I mean, Trey Smith is going to be playing at $25 million on the franchise tag this year. So, the league has exceeded where John Schneider's evaluation of the position of guard and center. It's time for Seattle to catch up because it has been devastating for years. And the other crazy thing here is you look at the roster, they don't really have other needs. They have spots that could be upgraded, maybe CB3. But, man, like the secondary, like where the linebacker room is at, assuming they can get Ernest Jones back, I think they'll work that out. The D-line, a lot of pieces there. The wide receivers, I think Geno's just fine. I'm not taking a quarterback here at 18. You got running backs. You need interior offensive line, man. So go get the guy. To me, the perfect fit is Gray Zabel, actually ahead of Tyler Booker. I think Booker will end up with a higher grade for me on Zabel, but I do think this is where the scheme fit really matters. We know that Clint Kubiak is going to come in with that wide zone background, very much in that Kubiak-Shanahan system with his dad. I mean, I like Tyler Booker, but in terms of the reach blocks and, you're trying to reach a nose tackle and turn his shoulder around so he doesn't make a play in the backfield on outside zone, I think Gray Zabel with his athleticism is going to be a better option for you there. I also think he's probably a better pass protector out the gate than someone like Tyler Booker too. So just a better scheme fit. These guys are going to be really close for me, I think. So we're going to go Zabel. At 18 for Seattle, I understand it's probably not what they're going to do. I'm just here to say that's a mistake. This team has got to stop having these third, fourth round dart throws on guards. They got to invest in a guy that's gonna come in as a starter and hopefully be a star player for him at that position. Then at Tampa Bay at 19, it's going to be another one of those risers from the combine. We're going to replenish that linebacker room with Jahad Campbell. Tampa Bay with Todd Bowles, I think, is a team that does value this position. It's just they've had for so long. They had Levante David, who they're hoping will be back. But he's starting to slow down. They're not sure if he's going to play again. I think he will go another year. But obviously they had Devin White for so long. I like Servasia Dennis, but man, Jahad Campbell looked really good in drills. None of these linebackers are going to have perfect tape coming out, but coming out of Alabama, I think he's relatively pro-ready. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go in the first round. This is about as high as he could go, I think, but I definitely think in that situation, ideally with a year next to Levante David as an LB2 to really learn the scheme, learn how things are done, then year 2, you hit the ground running as a potential star linebacker. Like, it's a perfect spot for him. Great blitzer as well. They want to send that heat, and you're not quite getting that role right now. They have missed, I think, that blitzing element from Devin White. You can get some of that with Jahad Campbell, so it's a phenomenal fit for Tampa. Even though I'm typically against linebackers in the first, there are situations where it can make a lot of sense. I think this is one of those for Tampa. Then pick 20 for the Miami Dolphins, where we traded down. I'm going to take Josh Simmons. Like I said, the idea was to go offensive line here. There was going to be options, whether it's a Gray Zabel or a Tyler Booker. I like going with the guy with long-term tackle potential. What I would do here, I would actually play Josh Simmons at right tackle, kick Austin Jackson inside to guard. Jackson is getting paid at right tackle, very low-end starter money. Maybe he can be better as a guard. But if it's 3rd and 8, I just don't trust him to hold up, even if he's made some incremental gains. And then, because Austin Jackson is comfortable as a tackle, in those games where Teron Armstead inevitably gets hurt, because it's going to happen, I think you can just leave Josh Simmons at right tackle, help him kind of get comfortable at one position for the year, and kick Austin Jackson out to left tackle. Kind of make him your swing tackle, starting guard. As a veteran, I'm just going to put more on his plate and see if he can handle it. In the meantime, hopefully Chris Paul can develop. I don't think he's ready to go, even in year 2 next year. And if he does, great. Patrick Paul, can be your left tackle. Simmons can just stay at right tackle. Great. That's my plan. There's alternative routes you can go. You can just take the interior player, keep your tackles as is. That's an option too. But I think the long-term upside for Simmons to be a good franchise tackle is there. There's a lot to like with him, frankly. So that's the pick. Then pick 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is where Matthew Golden is going to go. And I was surprised, frankly, that he lasted this long. Honestly, doing this exercise, I'm starting to realize how good this draft class is, man, because when Matthew Golden comes out and runs a 4.29, I was like, he's going in the top 12. But as I do the exercise, I'm like, where does that make sense? Where's the right fit for Golden to go? Maybe 12 for Dallas? Well, you're neglecting your offensive line issues if you do that. So we'll see how it all plays out. But, man, I really thought his tape was special. It was a surprise declaree, so it was just kind of like, how high are we really going on Matthew Golden, who I think most people hardly knew who he was, transferring over from Houston before this last season. But this has been a meteoric rise. I'm pretty sure the board's going to fall a little differently. No mock draft's going to be perfectly accurate. There's going to be a spot somewhere in the top 15, 16 picks where Golden makes more sense. But in this scenario, he's here at 21, and Pittsburgh's going to stop that slide. I mean, he talk about the perfect complement to a George Pickens, someone that, frankly, his size, the way he moves, it's Antonio Brown, 5'11", 191 pounds, with that speed, his acceleration, the change of direction. I mean, that's high praise, but you put that theoretical skill set, which I think it's there, the upside on Golden is just unbelievable. I don't know if it's Antonio Brown good. He was just a special talent, but kind of the same idea, man. Somewhere between Deontay Johnson and Antonio Brown, maybe. I don't know, but you need more of a separator type. You need more of a vertical presence in terms of a separator, someone that the defense is really going to respect, is going to take the top off the defense. Pickens is a vertical threat, but you don't necessarily see teams shading their safeties over the top because you're worried he's going to get wide open deep and burn past the corner, So Golden can be that, and he can be so much more. And Pittsburgh needs some more juice at wide receiver. Another thing I like about that too is it kicks other guys down the board. Instead of needing Austin to be your number 2 target, he becomes more of a number 3 option for you. Instead of needing someone that really disappointed last year in Roman Wilson to step up, he's more of in a competition to get that playing time. So it just does the nature of just pushing guys down the depth chart is healthy for that team too. Then the Chargers at pick 22. It's actually crazy when you really think about how many needs the Chargers have. They're really in very much a best player available type of situation. They need interior D-line. They need another corner. They need running back, wide receiver, tight end. They need interior offensive line as well. We saw what happened in that playoff game. We oftentimes see these teams, I don't want to say overcorrect, but focus on correcting the things that ended their season. And the pressure that they were getting from that offensive line, that group is just not where they want it to be. And they have a bunch of guys where it's like, yeah, they can play. Like Pipkins can play. Bozeman is like an okay fit for the run game, but really bad as a pass blocker. You've got Jamari Sawyer, can kind of play. I think Sawyer's been better as a tackle. He hasn't been able to regather that hype he had from his rookie season either. You've got Zion Johnson as well. He hasn't really fully developed in the way that you hoped. I think you got to plug some more talent into that group, especially for Herbert. Let's face it, he's a guy that just doesn't really feel out that space in the pocket when things get compressed up the middle. I think he just becomes uncomfortable as a player, and we saw that against Houston. So I really think this is as much of a need as anything else. And Tyler Booker's a great player, man. Talk about a guy that's going to anchor and not let anybody drive him back. He might occasionally lose left to right, lose that half man, and surrender a pressure that way. But what he's going to do for the run game too, which obviously the Chargers want to run the piss out of the football, he's their type. And then you can kind of lock that one spot in and create a competition. Does Zion learn how to snap and become a kind of that athletic center for like that Linderbaum type of player at center? I think that's probably a good route to go. And you have Pipkins and Sawyer compete at right guard. I don't think they're bringing Bozeman back. Maybe they do bring him back. And again, they have pieces, but it's a bigger need than I think people realize. They really want to create a superstar offensive line, and right now they've got the tackles, but the guards and center, it's just not where they need it to be. And frankly, you got to spend a first-round pick, most likely, if you're going to find that. So Booker off the board at 22, then the Green Bay Packers at 23. An easy pick here, it's going to be Jahdae Barron out of Texas. Another high riser, great workout. It's a great draft class, man. You look at this, and it's just, we had Will Johnson falling to 14 in this scenario. So this is a great steal for Green Bay, a perfect fit because they need slot help and outside help. Jahdae Barron is very much similar to what Trent McDuffie was coming into the league with inside-out experience. He's tough, he's quick, great tester, sticky coverage player, absolutely their type. We haven't heard a ton of news on the Jair Alexander front, but it's still expected that he won't be back. After that, it's Carrington Valentine, who had a promising season, got memed in the playoffs, but he's, I think, going to be a starter. Other than that, Nixon as a slot corner is very replaceable. You don't really have anybody else. So just for people making your mock drafts out there, I see a lot of D-line for Green Bay at 23. I don't know that the Packers can afford not to go either corner or wide receiver. I don't think people realize as well that Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson's health situations are dire. Watson's probably not going to play next year, and then he's a free agent. Doubs is going to have to consider retirement. And if he gets one more concussion, I think it's almost going to be a forced retirement from the doctors. So it's got to be either corner or wide receiver. I think Barron is the best player available. And you can probably look into day 2 for some more wide receiver help or free agency. There are some guys out there. I still would love to see Green Bay make a play to bring Devontae Adams home. But let's go stick in the division, but go to Minnesota at 24. I know they really want interior defensive line, but there's another player sliding here, and that's Malachi Starks. I mean, you've got pending free agent Cam Bynum, nice player. Metellus is going to be a free agent next year. We'll see what they ultimately do with Harrison Smith. To me, this is like, I know they need interior defensive line, but when a talent like Malachi Starks falls, and you're talking about, at least for now and hopefully the foreseeable future, Brian Flores' defense loves 3 safety packages. They all but live in it sometimes. Even if this is a third safety, he is a starter in this defense. I know going back to the Georgia safety well is a little scary after what happened with Lewis Cine, but Starks is just different. He is exactly what Brian Flores would want to upgrade the Harrison Smith role. Bynum plays a lot of free safety. Metellus is that kind of quasi-linebacker, box safety type. Harrison Smith, they ask to wear every hat. Malachi Starks can do that at a much higher level than Harrison Smith can do that right now. And again, maybe they haven't released Harrison Smith as of this pick, but if they end up getting Malachi Starks at 24, you can move on from Harrison Smith and then save some money, whether that's to pick up guys later in the offseason or to get some of that extra rollover cap for next year. I know they want to address the interior of the defensive line. I don't know that they can really pass on the talent of a Malachi Starks that is going to help your coverage problems too. Like, they have coverage problems and interior D-line problems. So thought that fit was really fun, even if it's maybe a little more untraditional. Then at Houston, pick number 25, very self-explanatory. We are going to reunite CJ Stroud and Emeka Egbuka. Got that chemistry right out the gate, but the value's there. I think wide receiver is a sneaky need for Houston. Stephon Diggs is most likely out the door there. Maybe he becomes really cheap and they bring him back, but then it's like, all right, you're coming back from an injury. What is Stephon Diggs at this point in his career? Tank Dell, unfortunately, you have to have major questions about his durability. And even if Tank Dell is able to make a full recovery, great. You get more of a full-size wide receiver for when you do want to come out and run the ball and be in 12 personnel. Egbuka is going to give you a lot more size and run blocking ability in those situations. And I think last year we just really saw Stroud get flustered at times, not always trust that things were going to be there when those wide receivers were out. And you obviously have Nico Collins, but to have a guy like Egbuka who he does trust, who is great at separating early, he's got great acceleration, he's a great route runner. I really like the fit schematically speaking for what they need. Kind of a no-brainer with him at 25. Then the Rams at pick 26. Going to give them what, in my opinion, would be the last missing piece for a defensive line that is shaping up to be one of the best in the league. They really hit on what they were looking for last year, obviously, with Jared Verse, with Braden Fisk. You've got Kobe Turner in there. You've got the kind of perfect cleanup man as a fourth piece in your pass rushing situations with Byron Young. But they do have a key missing piece in the nose tackle. None of those guys outside of Jared Verse are really run defenders. Turner's okay at it. He tries, but he's undersized. And Braden Fisk just, frankly, is horrible against the run. And that's not all his fault. He's just small and has tiny arms. Even if they have all these great pieces, they do have a nose tackle role in that front. And that went to Bobby Brown, who played 513 snaps for them, was a starter, and did a good job as a run defender. Now, if they can get Bobby Brown back, that's great. We're a week away from free agency at this point, and they have a lot of contract stuff that they're working with. It looks like he's going to hit the market, and he's a nice player. He might get more money than the Rams can afford. If he's gone, that's a gaping problem for them. They already were not a good run defense, but if you lose Bobby Brown, that's a huge problem. So to me, Kenneth Grant comes in from that Michigan program. he's up and down, but I do think can give you what Bobby Brown did. And it's not like Bobby Brown was some superstar. He's just a nice player. So hopefully you can get a cheap, rookie contract at an expensive position there and not just resume what they were able to do last year, but potentially get even a little bit better. Because I do think in time, Kenneth Grant's upside to be more of a presence on rush downs is much more than Bobby Brown. And I think he can be a better run defender as well. He's a really special athlete, and I think it's a good fit. Then at pick 27, we're going to go Josh Connerly Jr. here. This is one of those picks that could change very quickly if they do work things out before free agency with Ronnie Stanley. As of this recording, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, and they're going to create an opening at left tackle. If that's the case, you got to take Josh Connerly if he's here. He certainly has some stuff to clean up, but I do think with that coaching there, the need at left tackle, the easy plug-and-play ability of it all, you got to do it. I think it's a common mock draft pick for them for a reason. We'll see what they do with Stanley. But for now, that's where we're going to go. If they do take Stanley or bring Stanley back, I think I would take who our next pick is going to be with the Cleveland Browns, and that would be Mykel Williams for the Ravens. But with Cleveland here at pick 28 from that Myles Garrett trade, hell, even if you're Detroit here, keeping this pick, by the way, because some Lions fans will be like, hey, what the hell? You gave our pick away. Why did I watch this? Sure, if you don't trade for Myles Garrett and this situation happens, yeah, go get Mykel Williams or another pass rusher here as well. It all applies the same. But funny, everybody wants edge rushers. Surprise, surprise. Cleveland is going to replace Myles Garrett here with Mykel Williams. Not sure he's got the upside to do that. Not quite the fluid mover of a Myles Garrett, but he does have the size, the power, and some of the quick feet at times. I did like Mykel Williams. Unfortunately, he didn't test at the combine, and for a guy that you are kind of drafting off the traits, you would prefer to see him come out and test, and hopefully he does at Georgia's Pro Day, and if he has some monster workout, maybe he can generate some of that buzz that someone like Shamar Stewart has generated. But, played hurt, played on an ankle injury last year. The production is just not there for Mykel Williams. A lot of parallels to someone like Trayvon Walker here, just again without the testing. But even then, again, I don't think Mykel Williams has the hips and the bend and the fluidity of even a Trayvon Walker. So I think you're more talking about something like a Gregory Rousseau type of player who can be a really good 2 for you. Well, we are at the 28th pick. I know this is a pick you got from Myles Garrett, and it hurts to get a guy that can't be Myles Garrett, most likely. But you do got to start somewhere. And even number 2 edge rushers are hard to come by. I think if we made a list of all the true number 2 edge guys in the league, a lot of those guys would come in this 21 to 32 range of the draft. So we're going to go Mykel Williams. If nothing else, he is going to set a hard edge and be a phenomenal run defender. And that can be a little bit of an identity for Cleveland because Isaiah McGuire really emerged as one of the best edge-setting run defenders in the league. So you can really make that an identity to really funnel the defense, funnel the offense inside for your linebackers to clean up. But let's move on to the 29th pick for the Washington Commanders. I'm going to go Jalen Walker here. This is definitely a player I don't understand the top 12 hype on. He was a rush linebacker. He was basically Georgia's Avon Pace without the good run defense and coverage tape. I think he's a really good athlete. He didn't test at the combine. We'll see what he does at his pro day. Again, maybe he locks himself into the top 20 by running a 4.4 flat or something. I don't know that that's in there or not. I don't think he's a linebacker. I don't think he has the tape to play linebacker. Georgia didn't really ask him to do linebacker things. I think he is someone you're talking about converting to edge, which he did play some edge at Georgia. It was about a 50-50 split. But he's got shorter arms, not terribly short, but 32 inches. And he doesn't really have too much of a pass rushing plan at the moment. He's got power, but he doesn't convert speed to power. It's not like he arrives and throws his hands into guys and generates this crazy push. He does have leg drive and core power, so he can get his hands on you, but it's more of a steady push than it is these disruptive bull rushes. Really where he was best as a rusher was lining up as a stand-up linebacker and crossing guards' faces, where he does have a really good rip move on offensive guards that at the college level just didn't have the foot quickness to stay in front of him. It's going to be harder to do that in the pros. I think he can still do that in the league. But he's one of these guys where it's like, what are you? And that's why I have him more as a late first. I mean, I have a true second-round grade on him. I think I understand you get towards the end of the first, you run out of true first-round grades. Eventually, you got to find the right fit. And Washington is that fit for a lot of reasons. I mean, for a starting point, this is the team that has and employs Frankie Louvu and paired him with Bobby Wagner, who they use those guys a ton as blitzers to confuse and create matchup problems for any of their defensive linemen to really get that pass rush to overachieve their talent core last year. Dan Quinn did some excellent job with those two linebackers. If nothing else, you can use Jalen Walker in some of those ways. You have to get a little bit creative in terms of playing time, but hey, Bobby Wagner actually isn't under contract for this team right now. Wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back, but can definitely use him in that role in certain packages. And then you're also talking about the coach that converted Micah Parsons to an edge rusher. So, there's definitely a path for a really productive role for Jalen Walker. In a developmental sense, the traits are there. I think for Washington to get this kind of juice this late in the draft is well worth the risk. But I don't know, man. He's a weird player. Maybe this is just Georgia fatigue for me, where I'm tired of seeing all these underproductive guys that wore the red helmet and test well. And it's like, oh yeah, you got to take him in the first round. I don't know. But I will say in Washington, his chances of working at a very high level skyrocket. So that's a fun fit. Then the Buffalo Bills at pick 30. D-line help is essential, whether it's on the edge or the interior. I'm going to take Derek Harmon out of Oregon, who I think is a really fun two-way player, can help their run defense and improve their ability to push the pocket. You have Ed Oliver. Let's get him a little bit more size next to him. Much more of a natural pairing there. They have DeQuan Jones, obviously not getting any younger. So this is a pretty easy pick for Buffalo at pick 30. I don't see too many Bills fans arguing with that one. Then at pick 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. If the league lets this happen, it's going to be annoying, but Colston Loveland, who is very Travis Kelce-esque, a little bit undersized, but just moves so well, catches everything, smart guy. I don't even think Kelce's going to be back, but even if he is, this pick is the perfect developmental replacement. I don't think it's going to be the TCU kid they took last year. I thought he was pretty stiff. Wiley, right? I don't know. He got hurt too, so let's re-roll that dice on Colston Loveland. And then we will finish up with the Philadelphia Eagles at pick 32. I battled with this pick. There's two players I was between, and they're both Donovans. It's Donovan Ezaraku to replenish that edge group. We'll see what they ultimately do with Josh Sweat. The other one was Donovan Jackson, the guard convert, former tackle at Ohio State. That's the pick I'm going to go with here. I do think the Eagles, I mean, they never want the well to run dry on offensive line, and it has started to dry up a little bit, right? I don't want to say they lucked into Mekhi Becton, but it's going to be tough for them to retain him. I think he's going to get paid a decent, a lot of money that the Eagles are going to have a hard time matching. Kelce obviously just retired. Lane Johnson is going to be 35 next year. As great as that offensive line is, the reason it's so great is because they constantly replenish that thing. There's not amazing options here, but, Donovan Jackson making that switch inside, I do think will work really well for him. He's a strong guy. I know Lance Zierlein loves him. Lance Zierlein, who puts together the rankings on the Combine website, has him tied with Tyler Booker for the fourth best overall offensive lineman. That's certainly higher than the sort of consensus rankings have him at right now, but I do think this makes a lot of sense, and he would be a plug-and-play guard, and hell, maybe he could be a tackle in time because he did play at Ohio State. I like just making the full send situation on having him play guard, though. The other guy I was thinking about was Donovan Ezaraku. Again, could be a great pick for you Eagles fans, too, if you don't like the Donovan Jackson pick here. But there we go. That was a really fun mock draft. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do hit that like button. It really does help. There's a lot of mock drafts out there, so that like button does just help support the channel, gets this out in front of more people. And make sure you're subscribed. We are really going full send with draft content at this point, position rankings, mock drafts, guest interviews, you name it. It is going to be flying at you here. We're going to take a week to finish Studs and Duds and do our free agent reactions stream and hopefully an episode of the Fully Inflated Football podcast on free agency. And then again, full send with the draft. So thank you guys for watching. Drop your comments down below what you think of the picks. Hit that like button, and I'll see you soon. Peace out.